Hi, everyone. Scott, you're so
That's
funny.
that's my classic. Are we live?
We are live.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Learning Sound Synthesis Spotlight Series interview. I'm here today with Scott, who is enthusiastically
I'm
waving
waving to everybody now and in the future.
and already playing like practical jokes on us by
I'm
pretending
not
to be
not practical,
frozen.
impractical. Oh yeah.
Impractical jokes. Welcome to everyone. Thank you, Scott, for being here. I'm really
Hey,
excited
thank you for
to
having
talk
me. It's an
to
honor.
you today. And the topic, the kind of broad topic for today that we're going to be getting into is like the rest of these spotlight interviews, we're going to be learning a little bit about Scott in general, about your creative practice, about what it's been like for you to navigate the world of modular synthesis over the last few months or longer. And generally, what we're going for with these interviews is just to kind of hear from as many different people as possible on what it's like to dive into this world. What are some things that you find helpful? What are some things you find challenging? And hopefully, by doing that, we get to simultaneously celebrate you, Scott, and all of these amazing people and your accomplishments, and also kind of demystify and break down the process of learning modular synths, which can understandably feel very opaque and very intimidating for a lot of people.
And
So,
still do. And
and
still do.
still, yeah, and still do. Exactly. So that's why we're here, is just to continue to build that community, to break it down a little bit, and to share and celebrate some stories. So, welcome to everyone who's watching live. I see Posse in the chat. Hi,
Yay,
Posse. It's nice to have you
Posse.
here.
Thank you,
Go ahead
Posse.
and say hello. It's always nice to see who's tuning in. Why don't we get started, Scott, with a brief introduction? Can you give us just like a few sentences into what you think the highlights are? Who are you? What kind of music do you make?
Hmm.
The like 5 cent tour. I know it's a big
Five
question. It's
cent
fine.
tour.
Yeah.
5 cent tour. That's about what it's worth. All right. Yeah. Well, I'm an artist. I work in various mediums, and
Hmm.
audio is one of them. I guess
Yeah.
that's the 5 cent tour.
Okay. What kind of music in particular or sound worlds are you drawn to? Like if you had to, another challenging question, if you had to try to give it a
Yeah, well,
descriptive.
I would say thanks to learning sound and synthesis, my scope has broadened a lot more to include electronic music. So kind of like beyond electronic dance music,
Uh-huh.
into just kind of more of an appreciation for uh, interesting sounds. Like I've always been interested in sound, interesting sounds, interested in sounds.
Yeah.
Um, but that goes way back to listening to stereo recordings, and just being fascinated by production of albums and records and stuff. And I grew up in the 80s, born in the 60s, came of age in the 70s, and kind of like, was a teenager in the 80s.
Uh-huh.
So, getting cassettes and just being fascinated by, I still have my very first Sony Walkman. It's made out of metal. Doesn't work anymore. I don't know why. It doesn't work anymore. But I remember just being fascinated by the demo tape that came. That was like, this is stereo. You used to get tapes with things back then, and it was like the stereo. I was just like,
Yeah.
no way, this is amazing. It moves from that, and because up until then, kind of just listening to records and stuff on like a hi-fi system or something, it's just kind of in the room. And
Right.
unless you knew about the sweet spot to sit, and that was a big discovery, like listening to Sergeant Pepper in the Sweet Zone. I was like, what? Or just listening once you found a really cool album and you found like, wow, this actually happens here. Only I was a big headphone, it's been nothing but headphones since that Walkman, so
Right.
it's always been an attraction to kind of like the spatial
Yeah.
world. Now, when I was growing up and kind of doing music as a teen, it's guitar and recording on 4 tracks and stuff, and but that was really kind of like like song focused,
Okay.
but also like sound of the guitars and sound of double tracking guitars. That sounds really cool. Double tracking vocals. Everything had to be double tracked. So, but it was always from that kind of sort of perspective, like song.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, honestly, like I started learning sound synthesis in probably winter of 2021, maybe. Trying to think where that was. Fall of 21, maybe. And I knew about. I had an older brother who liked Tangerine Dream, liked instrumentals. Like instrumentals have always been kind of. I'm going way. I'm gonna steer it back, Sarah. Don't worry. I'm gonna steer it back. I'm going way out into the. But it kind of like formulates how I approach modular.
Yeah.
Now. So we'll get there. Everybody just hang in there. We're getting there. All right.
We're with you.
So instrumental music, kind of a big influence, definitely as a, so it's always been there, but I never thought about I could actually make instrumental music. I always thought like making music was like making songs and earnestly singing my teen songs and worrying about lyrics and, got really bogged down in that. And when learning sound and synthesis, your early modules where you're talking about like the history of electronic music, it's like, like, where the heck has this been my whole life? What the heck? How did I miss? I had no idea. I had no idea about like the early pioneers and the creativity and all that stuff. And it was both enlightening and kind of disheartening too, because like, I could have been doing this whole time. I could have been doing, my art leads to abstract, abstract expressionism. I'm very much into that sort of, expressive live. It's not labored. It's not crafted. What's the lyric gonna be? What am I trying to say? It's my art's much more expressive. And so discovering these artists and creative people who are just and this stuff that you make too, just like feedback, that's cool, just like what, I never even knew what you could just do, just like, oh, that's awesome. It can just be so wide open for interpretation, that's just like, oh man. So I've been kind of the process has been de-learning all that baggage from being pounded in about what music is and song structure. And I'm not discounting any of that. There's a craft and there's beautiful music all across the spectrum. So
absolutely.
But I never really realized that for myself, it could just be so open-ended and just free form. And this was so funny is discovering like-minded people, or I wasn't even like-minded people. I had to like come over to that side because up until then I may have heard, or I may have been like, some of the stuff can be a little hard to approach because it's just can be just pure sound or pure noise. And it's a little bit like, this isn't going to get stuck in my head. I won't be humming this later. But that's not the point, so finding people. I remember like one of our coaching calls or towards the end where we like share the stuff. This might've been in From Patch to Polish or something, which is after learning sound and synthesis, where we sit and we listen to what people have been working on. And I was just like, I was so touched that like, wow, here's like a group of people sitting and earnestly listening to this this funny noise thing that just kind of all over the place and things are happening, just, but everybody's actually paying attention. And I just thought that was so beautiful. Like I had never realized that people would actually with intent sit and listen to these things. And I can't really, I say things lovingly because I don't know how else to really. They're just things. I don't know. This whole sound. I don't know. I'm talking about.
Well, you said so many. Speaking of things, you said so many. I think really important things in that last few minutes, and I just want to kind of recap a couple of them that stood out to me, that I think are really valuable. The first thing is this idea of, coming into a community and realizing not only are there other people who are doing maybe similar things to what you want to do, maybe things you never even imagined or considered, and everyone is kind of there together and interested in listening to whatever the other person's doing, even if it doesn't make sense to them. And I think that that's a huge part of growing as an artist and a musician, is sitting with, literally or just conceptually, sitting with the stuff that you don't understand, right? And being like, I don't get this. Like, where is the melody? Where is the beat? Why isn't there a chorus? And then getting to a point where you've sat with it long enough to maybe start to ask different kinds of questions. Whereas like, does there need to be, or what am I feeling when I listen to this, right? And it sounds like that process for you was really impactful in bridging your art practice, like your visual art practice, with your sound making. That's how I understood what you said, which is really cool. Like, I think that's awesome.
Well, yeah, I mean, it opened up the possibility that it, like, basically kind of, giving yourself a break in just exploring, like the exploration. I think what's so amazing about kind of the modular, and I'm definitely on the modular side of it, and not so much in maybe the electronic software synthesis sort of thing. I like knobs. I like the visuals of the actual look of the gear is what roped me in. Before I could even
not alone.
Yeah,
sure a lot of people can relate.
Yeah, it's just intoxicating. I mean, it looks so cool. It's like, oh no way, what is that? And but just being able to explore with it, and just be able to go like, well, what does this knob do? Oh, that's interesting. And not being so like, well, does this make sense? I mean, I know we get into like composition and stuff later, but I think so much of it just needs to be, pure exploration, and just kind of listening, and not worrying so much about I don't know. You're always thinking in the back of your head, you can't help but go, well, is anybody going to like this? With who's? But so many people in our community have a significant others who is like, they don't like what I'm doing. It's so funny.
And the most important person to like what you do is
who? Tell me who.
Right? You are the most important and only person who needs to like what you do. And what I see over and over again, and if anyone's watching this who has this very normal, very human insecurity around, will anyone like it? Will anyone get it? Just please hear me when I say that I really firmly believe that if you like what you're doing, and if you're creating from that place of like, this is so exciting for me, this is the sounds I'm intrigued by, the colors I love, or whatever it is, the right people will get it, and people will click and will resonate with it. And you'll be happy because you'll be making the kind of stuff you want to make. Okay, so speaking of, Scott, one of your three things, when we were talking before this interview and kind of talking a little bit about Scott's journey, you kind of broke it down into three things that you really embraced. And one of them was this idea, is basically what we've been talking about, of like realizing that your music doesn't need to look or sound a certain way in order to be valid, right? And that your creativity can be yours. Is there anything else that you want to add about, just how that experience was kind of coming to that realization, or what helped you get there, or anything around that topic?
Yeah. I'd say, it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
I'm still learning.
Yeah, that makes sense.
and thanks to your awesome course and having lifetime, access to it, what I need to do is have more of like I need to drop back in. I always kind of like, I should go back. What module was that in? I should look at that again, because
You're always welcome.
thank you. I really appreciate it. I really do. I don't want to just underplay that, but that is it's like an awesome book on the shelf, this reference book. Like, what chapter was that? And so as I figure out things, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm finally getting to that one module. You know, what is an envelope follower? I think Sarah talked about that over here. What is that? So I think, you know, to try and answer maybe a little bit that it's an ongoing, when I got kind of like serious about, okay, yeah, I think I want to try this modular stuff. You know, I knew I wanted to, it was going to be an investment. I knew. There's just, you know, it just adds up. Unfortunately, it just adds up. The gear just adds up. Even though each individual module is not super, it's just like you might need 10 of them to make a sound. So, you know, it's a little bit like, what? I can't even hear it yet because I don't have an output module. Okay, I'm going to buy that. What is that? So there's that whole sort of ramp up, but I wanted to make sure that I was also investing in the education side of it. Like I wanted to be, have some sort of backbone. Like if I'm going to invest in this, it's kind of like, you know, the car manual for your car or something. I don't know if people read those anymore, but sometimes they make them. But you know, it's like just understanding what you have and how to actually use it. It kind of felt more like a commitment to like, no, I'm actually kind of serious. It's not just something that's going to sit over there and like, someday I'll get to that. And I also looked at it as kind of like the rest of my life sort of thing. Like I realized it's like, well, I'm just going to this is okay. This is cool. This is the, you know, the next phase for the rest of my life. I'm going to be having this around. And, you know, if they let me bring it into the old folks home, hopefully I won't have to sell it to afford the old home, old folks home. But, you know, I'm hoping I can have it because how cool would that be? Like, yeah, I'm just going to sit. Do I want my juice? Yeah, can I have my juice? And I'm just going to play with my module right here.
I hope that you are making sounds with modular for a very long time to come. And it's awesome to hear that you were consciously thinking about, you know, the education side of thing. Obviously, I as an educator, I'm biased in believing that that's really important. But from my own personal experience, like even before I was teaching this topic, I just remember how difficult it was to learn. I talk about this a lot online. I'm very open about this. You know, it can be, especially the world of modular synthesis, because there's so many ways to do it. And there's just such a literal, like overwhelming amount of stuff to learn. It can be so intimidating, and you can do it on your own. Some people are able to figure it out on their own, but I hear over and over and over again, like, you know, oh, I got so far and then I stopped because I just kept hitting this wall, or I just got discouraged, or I wasn't where I saw X or Y person at. And like, we can beat ourselves up about it so much. And so the whole reason behind why I'm so passionate about teaching is really rooted in this idea. It's like people want to be creative. They want to just be able to express themselves. And how can I make that as easy and like supportive of a process for you, so that you can make more art and like express yourself in the way that feels right to you, and not, you know, feel discouraged and intimidated and alone trying to figure it all out on your own, because it doesn't need to be that way.
Well, and that's what's so cool about what you've built. You've built this awesome, you know, structure. That's the, you know, tutorials and all the information. It's incredible the amount of, like, I was blown away. Like the first modules, I just like, oh my God, how did you even put all this stuff together? This is amazing amount of resources. You did such a good job of building your course. And then on top of that, you've built this community that is super supportive. And what's really interesting about, I found with the community is it's not like a competitive space, because of the nature of the modules and everything is so complicated on one end, and it can also be very simple if you break it down too, that it's not so much like, oh, that person, oh, they're doing what I want to do, or they're blah, 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 blah. It's kind of like, man, how did they get that sound? And then that person will be like, oh, well, that's just running such and such through such and such. It's like,
Right.
oh, that's
Right.
cool. But you could do that with these modules because all it
Yeah.
is this broken down. It's like, oh, so you don't actually need that
Yes.
module that you have. I can do it with these three things I have sitting over here. No way. So it's much more that sort of playful sort of
Yeah.
yeah, I have this module, but you don't need this one. You can probably do it this way. Or
100%.
there's different versions, and everybody is so open to that. It's not like, no, I'm not going to tell anybody what modules I'm using. These are my modules.
No.
It's none of that sort of weird competition.
Yeah. Well, and Scott, I want to say thank you for being part of it, because you are a huge part of what makes this, everyone in the community is obviously what makes the community so special. And you being part of that has meant a lot. So thank you for that. Let's change gears a tiny bit and just talk a little bit about more. I'm curious for you to talk about what you're doing now. Sound Parade, TV, or wherever you want to begin. Just tell us about, what are you doing creatively? And I'll drop some links in the chat so that people can check it out.
Yeah. Well, let's see. One of the things I kind of got into with the modular was I do virtual reality, like artwork and stuff. So interactive sort of environments and things. And sound was kind of missing from that sort of element. Because I was just kind of like, well, you know what, why don't I just license some music? Why don't I just license something really good and use that? Why should I beat myself up with trying to compose something? This is before I was thinking about modular. So now I'm working towards integrating that abstract sort of soundscapes to go with my abstract sort of weird VR stuff. So that's kind of the overall sort of like goal. Not there yet. All self-taught, so I have to learn everything myself, how to program that. Okay, how does that work? So it takes a while. And then Sound Parade. Sound Parade is my Blast Radio. So Blast Radio, I heard about because there's a modular artist named Lightbath, and he was on a podcast about modular. Once you go down the modular road, you're like podcast, you're like tutorials. It's like you just embrace it all. So he was talking about this Blast Box sort of piece of hardware. And since I'm kind of a hardware person, I was like, what's this all about? You just connect and you can broadcast to the internet? That sounds pretty cool. And so thus became Sound Parade. And Sound Parade has kind of morphed and developed a little bit. It's kind of a comedy thing, but it's audio. I was a fan kid listening to audio plays and stuff when I was a kid. Still enjoy. I don't listen to it as much though, but there was an artist named Ken Nordine who did a show called Word Jazz, and that was like on the NPR radio station or something. So that was like all about like sound and word jazz, and you talk about things, and it's all very cool. It's really great. It's just sonically fun to listen to. I'm nowhere near that, but that's kind of like the point of reference. And so Sound Parade has kind of morphed into what I'd like to do is use the modular in that sense of like triggering things randomly or through sequences or whatever for me to kind of like react to and improvise to in a comedic sort of way, kind of like Mystery Science Theater.
I love that. I love that. That's so great. I love that you're bringing in this comedy element. I mean, it seems very authentic to your personality, but it also is just so fun to like see people not taking everything so seriously. It's refreshing to be reminded that music and art and all of it can be fun. It can be just for fun and not be like lesser than anything else, right? Fun and joy can be
play.
Play. Exactly.
It's just like playing.
I love that. Yeah, it's such a good reminder. And Yeah, thank you for that. I'm personally very gratified that I have had that reminder.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great.
So that's, those are kind of the things that I'm kind of working on,
Great.
What's kind of nice about the blast box sort of thing, and that sort of like is I don't have to necessarily be, oh, let me record my modular thing. I can just hit broadcast, boop, and it just kind of goes out, and it happens in the moment. And Posse, who's a loyal listener to the Sound Parade, and Aiden's a shout out to my 2 listeners. So it goes out and it happens in that moment, and then it's kind of gone. I do archive the shows, but chances of any of that stuff going out again are
Well, that's great, because that speaks to what you said at the beginning of this conversation, how you felt like your art making was leaning more toward an in the moment creative process, and then your music making was feeling much more restricted.
Yeah.
I have to write all the right chords and notes. But then when you sort of realized that, wait, why can't my music making be this way, it dawned on you that it can, in fact. And it's so cool to see you just putting that into practice and having this very spontaneous way of engaging with your music and your synth. So congrats. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. And then I get to comment on it. So in the Sound Parade world, there's 3 voices that have a conversation. So there's kind of me who's talking. Then there's a voice who's kind of like my thoughts. And there's another voice who people call the imp, but I don't know. He doesn't really have a name, but he's just more of the kind of like, why are we doing this? What's this for? Who's going to listen to this? Nobody cares about this. Why are you doing this sort of thing? Or, boy, you're spending a lot of time on that, aren't you? Or you think you're very clever doing that, don't you? So there's that sort of like thing. But that voice is kind of funny because as I'm doing, sometimes I'll just like, okay, I'm going to build a patch and here we go. And then it'll be that sort of like, well, he doesn't really know what he's doing. I don't know. Why is he turning that? He's been on that for a while. So there's
I love that.
Excuse me. There's this running conversation. So depending on your tolerance for that sort of thing, it'll either be irritating or entertaining.
I also love that you're taking this part of our, I'm sure everyone watching can relate to those feelings, those thoughts, like, this is so stupid. Oh my God, you just ruined it. You shouldn't have turned that knob or whatever, right? We all have that. And I love that you're taking that and you're like making it part of your creativity. I think that's like super cool. You're just like, you know what? These thoughts are going to be there anyway. I'm just going to bring them in and like play with them. And as a result, probably, sometimes let them kind of lose power. Just be like, that's just a goofy little voice talking about stuff. I love that so much. Super cool ideas. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to say, for those of you who are watching, who are new to the learning sound and synthesis world, whether you've just kind of come into this community, first of all, welcome.
Yes.
If you're curious about learning sound and synthesis, I'm going to leave a link in the chat. If I can figure out how to type at the same time as live streaming, which is kind of difficult. I'm going to put a link here in the chat. And what that link is going to bring you to is the waitlist for learning sound and synthesis, which is my online modular synthesis and sound design class. It opens up 2 times per year. And as you've probably gathered from this conversation, learning sound and synthesis will teach you everything you need to know related to modular synths so that you can make music with modular, design your own sounds, whatever it is you're interested in, whether it's like experimental generative music or designing classic synth leads and bass lines, or making sci-fi video game music, or doing a direct to radio comedy show. It's really about giving you the tools and techniques, and also not just technical stuff, but creative, conceptual kind of framework for approaching these instruments to empower you to just make the kind of music you want to make with these instruments. So if you're curious, you can go to that website and sign up for the waitlist. And that just means that you'll be notified in January, February of 2024 when we open up the next round. And if you have questions, you can always send me a message and I'll be happy to chat. And as you can see on Scott's face, he's really excited for you.
I am, because what you see with Sarah here is what you get. I mean, that's what's so, Sarah's warmth and let's say, love comes through in the curriculum. And it's you're going to be kind of blown away. I know everybody who does these interviews, we all say the same thing, because we all sound like we're the converts, and but we're all just such big fans of what Sarah has done and built, that it is really worth investing in. And you'll get, even if you can apply so much of it just to your other creative aspects, because it's really, at the end of the day, it's about your creativity.
That's right.
And so many of the lessons and stuff that Sarah talks about can be applied to everything. How you approach, how you structure your day, how you set time aside for creative pursuits. And it's such an inviting environment, and there's so much good information. That's what's, I guess, it's still amazed. It's still good. And what's cool about it is it's based in science, in the sense that it's not like, oh, they discovered a new CV, controlled voltage. Like, no, it's actually electronics. So all the stuff that Sarah talks about, it's not going to go out of fashion. It's not going to be like, oh, all of a sudden a filter doesn't work anymore. Oh, we have to upgrade filters. Filters are new now. That's not how filters work anymore.
Right.
Modulation, no, that's so last century. That doesn't work anymore. You have to change. Like, it's fundamentally gonna be this stuff for forever. So the curriculum is relevant now and in the future, and whenever you drop in on it. So it's
well,
awesome.
Thank you, Scott.
Sarah's doing awesome.
Thank you so much again for being part of the Learning Sound Synthesis community. I really, truly mean it.
Thank you.
For everyone who's watching, who is in the community, thank you for being part of this. You all are amazing. For everyone who's watching, who's not in the community, you're welcome to join.
Come on in.
Send me a message. I'm happy to talk anytime about whether it's the right fit for you, learn more about your goals, all of that kind of stuff. And I think with that, that's it. Unless you've got any final parting words for us today.
No, I will just say, I want to say one quick thing.
Yeah, please.
About like the gear, and if you're intimidated about like, kind of the investment sort of thing in the gear and stuff. So much of this, the concepts and things you can do if you have a computer. Yeah. I just want to say a shout out to VCV Rack.
Yes.
The software part of this, that's free. So if I was advising somebody who was just kind of like, well, I want to do this, but man, I'm never going to be able to afford all this gear and hardware stuff. I would say you can get a lot of mileage out of VCV Rack. I know it's like, but it's on the computer, because that's exactly what I felt like. No, I don't want to make music on the computer. I want knobs. I want this. But if you take a little bit of money and invest it in, say, MIDI controllers that have sliders and knobs, you can get a lot of MIDI controllers and things and have a tactile interface for your computer and use VCV Rack. I just kind of want to mention that, because VCV Rack, I see what people do with it, and I'm always like, that's amazing. It's amazing. And actually, for Sound Parade, I'm actually considering building a lot of stuff in VCV Rack, because I don't have the money to buy 7 samplers that will randomly go off, but they're all free in VCV Rack, so just load them up.
Scott, that's such a good point. I'm going to drop the link in the chat for people in case that's new to you. Amazing. We use it in Learning Sound Synthesis. Mm-hmm. I'm not sponsored by them in any way. I just am a big fan. It's free to download. There are like actually thousands of modules that are free. It's astonishing. And so, if finances are a reason why you haven't been exploring this, but you're genuinely curious, this is a fantastic place to start, because it can run on your computer and you can learn all the same techniques and all the same workflows and create all the same sounds. And to Scott's point, a simple MIDI controller can give you that like coveted kind of tactile relationship as well, in a really nice way. So thank you.
Yeah.
Such a good
Yeah.
reminder. I appreciate it. Always good to share. Okay. Well, okay. Congrats on everything, Scott. Keep going with
Thank you,
all the things
Sarah.
you're doing. I can't wait to see how it continues to develop, and keep us posted.
I will.
Okay.
I will. Thank you, Sarah, and best of luck to everything you're doing too.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time. See you all later. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.
Take care. Be well.